The hive had never allowed an outsider to cross its gates until the day a lone human walked into the queen's throne room. The gates themselves were alive, two colossal slabs of black chitin that peeled open with a hiss, as if the hive exhaled in irritation at the intrusion. Beyond them stretched a canyon-like corridor lit by veins of bioluminescence that pulsed in rhythm with the hive's heartbeat. Drones lined the walls like statues, their armored carapaces glistening wet under the glow. Each compound I tracked, the figure walking forward, soft flesh among monsters of obsidian and steel. Jackson Hale didn't quicken his pace. His boots echoed hollow against the resin floor, a rhythm that seemed painfully loud in the suffocating silence. He kept his eyes steady, though he could feel thousands watching, assessing whether he was prey, an intruder, or something else entirely. At the far end of the hall, the hive's throne room yawned open like the maw of a predator. The air grew hotter, thicker, tinged with the metallic temps of venom sacs suspended in glassy pods along the ceiling. The queen sat upon her living throne, a mass of shifting, pulsating resin fused to her body like an exoskeletal crown. She towered above him, her segmented arms folded with slow menace. Her mandibles clicked once, and the sound reverberated like a hammer striking bone. Her daughters stood in semicircles below her, princesses bred for war in command, their armor gleaming with oils secreted by the hive itself. Their antennae flickered nervously as they watched the human enter. A murmur rippled through them, subtle but undeniable. Not hatred, not disgust, something else. Curiosity. Jackson stopped at the foot of the throne's steps. He bowed stiffly, not as a servant, but as a soldier, acknowledging another. The queen's compound eyes locked onto him, their faceted surfaces reflecting his image 100 times over. Human, her voice hissed through layered mandibles, translated through a guttural device grafted to her chest. You stand in the heart of my hive. Do you understand where you are? Jackson's throat tightened, but he didn't let it show. I do, he answered evenly, and I know what it means. The queen leaned forward. It means you are one word away from death. The drone's claws flexed, scraping the resin floor. The daughters froze, their antennae twitching, yet Jackson didn't flinch. He looked not at the queen, but at her daughters, their unblinking stares reflecting faint wonder. He spoke not for the throne, but for them. Then let me earn the right to be more than that. A hum shivered through the hive. The daughters shifted, exchanging quick glances. Whispers clicked softly in their mandibles, not in hatred, but in something the queen had not expected. Interest. The queen's gaze narrowed. She had seen it too. The spark. Her mandibles clicked twice, sharp and decisive. You will speak, human. But know this: every word you say will bind your fate. My daughters will hear you, and if you twist their minds, you will not see another sunrise. The human inclined his head. Fair enough. The chamber grew quieter still, suffocating in its silence. The daughters leaned in ever so slightly, their antennae trembling, their eyes locked on the human more than on their queen. Jackson could feel it, just a sliver of something dangerous, not acceptance, not loyalty, but a crack in the wall of fear the queen had built around her hive, and sometimes a crack was all it took. The queen's decree had been simple: the human would speak. But the hive had not prepared for what his words would stir. The daughters gathered in a half circle around Jackson the following cycle. They sat upon resin benches carved from the very bones of the hive, their carapaces gleaming in greenish light. Above them, the throne loomed in shadow, its occupant silent, yet suffocatingly present. Jackson stood at the center, under the weight of countless alien eyes. He took in a breath, steadying himself. The air tasted of damp earth and venom, heavy and alive. You want me to speak of humanity, he began. His voice carried strangely in the chamber, fragile compared to the deep hums of the hive, yet sharp enough to cut through the silence. So I will, not of power or conquest, but of survival. The daughters leaned forward, their antennae quivering. The queen's mandibles twitched, but she said nothing. Jackson paced slowly, boots thudding against resin. Earth is not easy. Our world was not gentle to us. Storms, famine, war, our history is carved in struggle. But in every age, when we stood on the edge of extinction, we endured. One daughter, her shell traced with crimson markings, dared to speak. You endured how, when everything was lost? Jackson met her gaze without flinching. Together, a human alone can die quickly. But a human with another at his side, that bond is stronger than any enemy. We fight for one another. We die for one another. The murmurs spread among the daughters, soft clicks and whispers. Their mandibles moved rapidly, sharing impressions the queen couldn't miss. She shifted upon her throne, her massive form casting long shadows that swallowed the chamber walls. Another daughter, this one younger, her carapace still faintly translucent with youth, raised her voice. Do you forgive, human, if one betrays the other? The question silenced even the drones. Jackson exhaled slowly. Forgiveness. It is not easy, but yes, we forgive because hatred binds us to the past, and forgiveness lets us move forward. It is not weakness, it is strength. The young daughter tilted her head, as though tasting the idea for the first time. Forgiveness had no place in the hive. Failure was punished, disobedience erased. To forgive was unthinkable. Yet the word lingered in the air like a forbidden fruit. The queen's claw tapped once against the throne. The sound was sharp, a warning. Her daughters stilled, but their eyes remained fixed on Jackson. He pressed on, sensing the tension coil tighter. You asked why I came here. It's not to conquer. It's not to deceive. It's because sometimes survival means learning from others. Humanity learned from its enemies as often as its friends. Perhaps the hive can do the same. The daughters exchanged looks. Some leaned closer, drawn by the rhythm of his voice, by the strange warmth of his words. They were warriors bred for loyalty and obedience, yet here they sat, captivated by the fragile creature before them, and the queen noticed. Her mandibles spread, releasing a hiss that vibrated through the chamber. She had ruled through fear for countless cycles. She had commanded loyalty with venom and fire. Yet her daughters leaned not toward her throne, but toward the human who spoke of unity, sacrifice, forgiveness. A spark of rebellion had slipped into her hive, and it was taking root in the minds of her bloodline. Jackson saw her eyes narrow, saw the fury glitter behind those faceted orbs, but he did not stop. He raised his chin, his voice stronger. Strength is not in how tightly you hold power. Strength is in how much you trust others to share it. A dangerous silence followed, then clicks of mandibles, whispers like dry leaves in the dark. The daughters spoke to one another, not in fear, but in wonder. The queen's claw slammed down. The drones jolted. The whispers stopped, but it was too late. The words had already spread. The hive never slept. But that night, it felt as though the walls themselves were awake watching. Jackson Hale walked the narrow resin corridors, escorted by two silent drones. The tunnels glowed faintly with veins of living bioluminescence, the light pulsing like blood through arteries. The silence was heavy, broken only by the skitter of insect claws against stone, but he felt ties that lingered too long, antennae twitching as he passed. Every shadow seemed to breathe. Every chittering echo carried his name. The queen's throne room had emptied hours ago, but its aftershock lingered. Her daughters had leaned toward him, hungry for his words. The queen had seen it, and so had her warmish. The hive was stirring, and not in his favor. When he was led to his chamber, an oval of chitin walls and a resin floor that smelled faintly of acid, Jackson pretended to rest. But he kept his ears sharp, his mind sharper. He didn't have to wait long. From the crack of the doorway, a shadow lingered. Small, quick, deliberate. Not a drone. Drones didn't hesitate. This one did. You should not speak so freely. A whisper clicked from the darkness. The voice belonged to a daughter. Her shell gleamed faintly with streaks of silver as she stepped closer. The hive listens, always. Jackson sat up slowly. And yet you came to warn me. Her aunt twitched nervously. Because your words are dangerous. Dangerous to me? He asked quietly. She hesitated. Dangerous to her? The shadow slipped away before he could reply, vanishing into the tunnel as skittering feet approached. Jackson lay back down as the drones passed by, their compound, eyes sweeping the room like searchlights. Elsewhere in the hive, the queen met with her war mistresses. The chamber was dark, save for glowing sacks of venom that hung from the ceiling like lanterns. Their bodies encircled her, armored and scarred. Veterans of countless conquests. The human corrupts. One mistress rasped, her mandibles clattering. Already the daughters murmur of him. They linger too long in his presence. They echo his words when they think we do not hear. Another added, it is the human way. They spread not with armies, but with ideas. Ideas that wrought obedience. The queen's eyes glinted, cold as obsidian. Then we must ensure his words go no further. Her claws drummed the throne, sharp and final. We will test their loyalty. And if he has poisoned it, her mandibles spread wide, dripping venom. Then I will cut it out. Back in his chamber, Jackson's thoughts raced. He had seen the spark in the daughter's eyes, the dangerous, fragile seed of curiosity. And now he felt the weight of the queen's gaze everywhere, pressing against the walls. Crawling beneath his skin, he paced the room, feeling the hive's living floor flex beneath his boots. They'll test me, he thought. They'll test them. The faint echo of claws skittered outside, pausing just long enough to remind him he wasn't alone. He moved to the wall, pressing his palm against its warm surface. He didn't know if it was alive, but it pulsed beneath his hand like a living heart. For the first time since he entered the hive, Jackson wondered if he had already gone too far, and yet, deep inside, he knew the truth. It was too late to stop. The hive was listening. The daughters were whispering. The queen was watching. The trap was already being set. The throne room was not a chamber that morning. It was an execution ground dressed as ceremony. The walls of chitin gleamed wet, as if freshly bled. Bioluminescent veins pulsed brighter than usual, throwing long shadows across the assembled daughters. Drones lined the hall in double ranks, their claws tapping in unison, a steady drumbeat of intimidation. Jackson Hale was escorted into the chamber, unbound, but the weight of the silence pressed heavier than any chain. He could feel the queen's eyes before he saw her, vast and glimmering from the throne that towered like a mountain of resin and bone. The daughters stood below her, arrayed in their ceremonial armor. Their antennae twitched nervously, betraying tension their stillness tried to hide. Some glanced at him when they thought their mother wasn't watching. Others fixed their gaze firmly on the ground. The queen's mandibles clicked, slicing through the silence. Her voice rolled across the chamber, guttural and sharp. My daughters, my blood, today you will prove your loyalty. The daughters stiffened. Jackson felt the trap closing, every word sharpened into a blade. The queen leaned forward, her carapace gleaming under the light. This human stands before you. He has spoken of survival, of unity, of hope. Her voice dripped venom with the last word. But hope is poison when it rots obedience. So I ask you now. Her eyes swept over them all, before landing on Jackson, pinning him in place. If battle came upon you this day, who would you trust to lead you? The blood of your queen or the fragile voice of a human? The silence was suffocating. Even the drones froze, as if the hive itself held its breath. Jackson's pulse thundered in his ears. He had not asked for this test, but here it was. Noose wrapped around every throat in the chamber. He looked at the daughters, meeting their eyes, one by one. Don't speak, he thought. Don't give her reason. but the spark he had seen in them before still glowed. One daughter stepped forward. Crimson patterns traced her carapace, marking her as a seasoned warrior. Her voice was steady, though her antennae trembled. "I would trust the human." The chamber erupted in a ripple of gasps, clicks, and hisses. Drones shifted, claws tightening. Another daughter, younger, added her voice, fragile but clear. "The human speaks truth, truth I have never heard here." The queen's mandibles opened wide, a hiss rattling the chamber. Her eyes burned with venomous fury. Silence, but it was too late. More daughters shifted, some clicking softly in agreement. Their eyes darted to Jackson, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous, belief. Jackson stood frozen, his stomach twisting. He hadn't asked them to follow him. He hadn't wanted this. But the moment was undeniable. The queen's greatest weapon, fear, had cracked. The queen rose from her throne, towering above them all, her shadow swallowing the hall. Her claws dug into the resin floor with a screech. "You shame me," she snarled, her voice like thunder. "You betray the blood that birthed you." The daughters flinched, but did not retract their words. They stood trembling, yet still they stood. Jackson's heart pounded. He had won nothing, only revealed a fracture in the hive's foundation. And fractures could collapse an empire. The queen's eyes locked onto him, venom dripping from her mandibles. In that gaze, he saw a vow. She would not forgive this. She would not forget. The hive did not wait for dawn to punish betrayal. They came for Jackson in the dead of night. The chamber walls pulsed faintly with bioluminescent veins, casting sickly green light over his restless form. He hadn't slept. He knew better than to trust silence in the hive. So when the drones crashed through the doorway, resin claws clamping around his arms, he was ready. They said nothing. They never did. Their grip was iron, their carapaces slick with resin. Jackson struggled once instinct, but quickly stopped. Resistance here wasn't bravery. It was suicide. The drones dragged him down the hive's arteries, his boots scraping over resin slick with moisture. Shadows crawled along the walls, drones following in the periphery, their eyes glowing red like coals in a furnace. At the end of the corridor, the throne room opened before him. This time, it was darker. Venom sacs above had dimmed, casting the chamber in a green-black haze. The throne loomed like a mountain, the queen coiled upon it. Her massive form still as stone, and the daughters were already there. They stood in rows along the walls, their antennae low, their eyes wide. None spoke, none dared. Jackson could see their mandibles trembling, the faint tremor of guilt, fear roar, both. The drones shoved him forward, forcing him to his knees. Chains rattled as they locked his wrists and ankles. Cold resin cuffs bit into his skin, each one infused with venom that burned faintly against his flesh. Jackson raised his head anyway. He wouldn't cower. Not here. Not now. The queen's mandibles clicked once, sharp enough to cut the silence. Her voice slithered through the chamber, heavy and venomous. "Human, you have poisoned my daughters with your lies. You have dared to set yourself above me in my own hive." Her claws dug into the throne, cracking resin. "Do you understand what you have done?" Jackson met her stare, every nerve screaming at him to look away. But he didn't. "I only told them the truth," the queen hissed, the sound rattling the chamber walls. "Truth," she spat. "Truth is what I decree, and my decree is life or death." She rose from the throne, her colossal form towering over him. Each step shook the floor. Each click of her claws echoed like a war drum. She stopped just before him, lowering her massive head until her faceted eyes reflected his face 100-fold. Her breath was hot, fetid, laced with venom. "Then your truth ends here." Jackson's pulse thundered. The daughters stood frozen, watching. He could feel their eyes, their terror, their shame. None moved to help. None dared. but he would not give her the satisfaction of fear. He straightened his back, chains rattling. "If that's what it takes," he said quietly, "then kill me. But no, this killing me won't kill what they've heard." A murmur rippled through the daughters. Just a flicker of sound, quickly silenced, but enough for the queen to notice. Her mandibles flared, rage boiling. She whirled on them, her voice cracking like a whip. "Silence. Do not look at him. Do not think of him. He is nothing." The daughters bowed their heads. But Jackson saw it, the hesitation, the spark. Even now, even with him chained and broken before them, they looked to him. Not her. The queen turned back, towering above him once more. Her claws rose, dripping venom that hissed when it struck the floor. Jackson kept his eyes steady, unbroken. If she killed him here, he thought, then maybe his death would speak louder than his life. The hive was never truly dark, but that night, the glow of its veins seemed weaker, like a beast holding its breath. Jackson Hale sat chained in silence, wrists bound by venom-laced resin, the sting constant against his skin. The throne room had emptied, leaving only the echo of the queen's threats rattling in his head. He expected drones at any moment to drag him out and finish what she had promised. Instead, he heard claw-soft, careful, almost hesitant. The doorway shifted. A figure slipped inside, her shell gleaming faintly with silver streaks under the dim light. A daughter. Behind her came two more, crimson-marked warriors whose mandibles clicked nervously. Together, they moved quickly, their claws working over his chains with resin-cutting tools carved from their own spines. "You shouldn't be here," Jackson whispered. His voice was hoarse but steady. "If she finds out, she already suspects," the silver-streaked daughter murmured. Her antennae twitched with fear. "But we cannot watch you die." The chain snapped loose, resin shattering with a muffled crack. The venom burned one last time before his wrists were free. He rubbed the raw skin, staring at them. "You risk everything," he said. One daughter met his eyes, mandibles tight. "You risked more. You spoke truth. No one dared speak, and for that, she will kill you." They guided him out, into the hive's hidden veins, narrow tunnels dug for maintenance drones, lined with glowing fungi that pulsed faintly with light. The air was damp, the silence broken only by distant clicks and the scurrying of unseen claws. The daughters led him swiftly, antennae flicking at every turn. Jackson could feel their fear-sharp electric, pressing down on them with every step. Finally, they stopped in a cavern where bioluminescent vines draped the ceiling like constellations. The silver-streaked daughter pointed to a tunnel sloping upward. "This leads beyond the hive. You can escape." Jackson stared at the opening. Freedom. The chance to live. But he didn't move. One of the daughters hissed softly, "Go, before they catch you." Jackson shook his head. "I can't." Their antennae froze, disbelief radiating through their posture. "You would choose death." He looked at them, these towering, armored beings, bred for obedience, yet trembling, in fear of their own mother. He saw not monsters, but children caught in a web of fear. "I won't run," he said. His voice was quiet, but unshakable. "If I leave, nothing changes. The queen stays the same. And you," he gestured to them, "you'll carry the guilt forever." The daughters exchanged frantic looks. "Then what will you do?" Jackson straightened, rubbing his raw wrists. "I'll face her again. Not with chains this time. With truth." Their mandibles clattered in disbelief. "She will kill you." "Maybe," Jackson admitted. "But if I run, then everything I said to you dies here. If I stand, then maybe." He locked eyes with them, steady. "Maybe it lives." The silence stretched, heavy as stone. Finally, the silver-streaked daughter lowered her head. "Then we will stand with you." The others echoed her, trembling but resolute. Their claws tightened around their spears. For the first time, defiance sparked openly in their eyes. Jackson felt the weight of it, the risk, the certainty of blood, but he also felt something else, hope. He turned back toward the hive's heart. Then let's finish this. The tunnels. Behind them pulsed with faint red light, drones already stirring. The hive was waking. The queen would know soon enough, and when she did, the throne room would no longer belong to her alone. The hive's throne room had always been silent, a cathedral of obedience. But on this day, silence shattered. The great chamber thrummed with unease. Drones lined the walls, their claws poised, their multifaceted eyes glowing with cold red fire. The queen sat upon her living throne, her massive body coiled tight with fury. Her mandibles flexed as she glared at her assembled daughters, who shifted uneasily in their ranks. And then Jackson Hale entered, not in chains, not dragged. He walked freely, flanked by the daughters who had freed him, their carapaces gleaming in the eerie green light. Their antennae stood tall, their claws gripped spears not pointed at him, but at the guards along the wall. Gasps rippled through the hive. The queen rose with a hiss that rattled the resin walls. Her voice thundered, shaking the very throne. Beneath her treachery, her claws slashed through the air, spraying venom that hissed where it struck the floor. My own blood defies me. You dare bring this human here again? The daughters didn't kneel. Not this time. The silver-streaked one stepped forward, her voice trembling but steady. You rule us with fear. He showed us another way. The queen froze, as if struck. The words echoed in the chamber, carrying more weight than any spear. The drone shifted, antennae twitching. Their instincts pulled them toward obedience, but hesitation poisoned their steps. The queen's power had never been questioned. Until now. Jackson stepped forward, placing himself between the daughters and the throne. His voice cut through the hive, softer than the queen's roar, but sharper than her venom. You asked who they would trust. You already know the answer. The queen's eyes burned with venomous light. You are nothing, a fragile thing, a corrupter of loyalty. Maybe, Jackson said, but if loyalty must be bought with fear, then it isn't loyalty at all, it's slavery. A wave of clicks and whispers erupted among the daughters. For the first time, their voices weren't hushed. They weren't hidden. They spoke openly. Defiantly, mandibles clattering like the sound of cracking stone. The queen roared, slamming her claws into the floor. Silence. But there was no silence anymore. One daughter, then another, stepped beside Jackson, their antennae raised high, their spears lowered in defense not against him, but against their own mother's drones. The defiance spread like wildfire, burning through the ranks. Soon, dozens stood at his side, shoulder to shoulder, a wall of armored bodies, protecting the lone human at their center. The queen's eyes widened not with fear, but with a fury so sharp it cut the air. She towered above them all, her mandibles dripping venom, her body trembling with rage. You would betray your queen for him? For a human? The silver-streaked daughter raised her chin. Not for him, for truth. The hive shook with her. Words. Jackson stood still, the eye of the storm. He knew the choice had been made, and there was no going back. Drones pressed forward, torn between their queen's command and the wall of daughters defying her. The chamber quivered, caught on the knife edge of civil war. The queen leaned forward, her voice low and venomous. Then let the hive decide. Blood will answer. The drones screeched, claws slamming against the floor. The daughters braced, spears poised, antennae flicking with raw defiance, and Jackson stood at their center, unarmed, his gaze locked on the queen. The first spark of rebellion had ignited. The fire was about to consume the hive. The hive had been built on silence. Now it roared with defiance. The throne room was chaos. Drones screeched, their claws clashing against resin as they pressed forward. Daughters hissed in defiance, spears leveled, antennae high, their armored bodies braced like shields. The air crackled with venom, tension, and the scent of rebellion, and at the center stood Jackson Hale, unarmed, a single human surrounded by warriors who had chosen him above their queen. The queen's colossal form loomed above them all, her mandibles wide in fury, venom dripping in long strands to the floor. Her voice boomed through the chamber, shaking the very walls. You would tear apart the hive for him. Her daughters did not bow. Not this time. The silver-streaked daughter stepped forward, her spear trembling in her claws but her voice steady. No, we will tear apart the hive for ourselves. He only reminded us we could. The queen recoiled as though struck. The words cut deeper than any blade. Jackson raised his voice, calm amid the storm. This doesn't have to be blood. You want loyalty? Then let them choose it freely. Rule by fear, and they will always betray you in silence. Rule by trust, and they will follow you anywhere. The queen's multifaceted eyes narrowed, reflecting 100 shards of his image. For the first time, hesitation flickered there. The daughters pressed closer to Jackson, their ranks thickening, whispers swelling into clicks of open defiance. Even the drones hesitated now, antennae twitching, uncertain. The hive itself seemed to tremble, caught between fear and something far stronger. The queen slammed her claws into the floor, venom spraying, cracking resin. You speak of trust as if it can hold an empire together. Trust is weakness. Jackson didn't flinch. His voice was steady, cutting through the chamber like steel. Then why do they stand with me instead of you? The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. The daughters' eyes locked on their mother, not in worship but in challenge. The hive, for the first time in memory, stared not up but across. The queen's breath rattled her mandibles, trembling. She could order the drones to strike, but even now, their hesitation betrayed them. She could slaughter her daughters, but in that instant, she saw what Jackson had already understood. Fear could break bodies, but it could not hold hearts. She sank back upon her throne, venom dripping uselessly to the floor. Her massive frame seemed smaller, diminished. Her voice cracked, no longer thunder but stone crumbling. Then the hive has changed. The daughters did not kneel. Jackson did not bow, but they listened. The queen's mandibles clicked slowly, bitter but resigned. If you believe trust can bind stronger than fear, then let the hive test it. The daughters exhaled as one, antennae lowering in cautious relief. The chamber's tension eased. Though it did not vanish, Jackson held her gaze. He knew this was not victory, not yet, but it was survival. And survival was the seed of change. The queen turned her head away, voice heavy with finality. Go, human. Walk free of my hive. The venom you brought will not be undone. Jackson inclined his head, not in obedience, but in acknowledgement. He turned, walking toward the great gates as the daughters flanked him, not as guards, but as allies. The hive's bioluminescent sky stretched above as the gates opened, light spilling across him. For the first time, he stepped into it not as a prisoner, but as a man who had shaken the foundation of an empire. The daughters followed, their whispers echoing through the hive, spreading like wildfire, and behind them, the queen sat upon her throne, alone, drowning in the truth she could not unsee. Her daughters trusted the human above all.